this computer. Yeah.
You can go get some if you want, Bubba. Rio.
Rio.
There he is.
Oh, it's Rio Butt.
Rio Butt.
Hello, Rio Butt. Hello, Naomi.
Hi.
How are you?
I am doing so good. I'm really excited to talk with you. Maybe if I even could see you, that would be even better. Come here, kitty.
Rio's still in the spotlight.
Yes, he is always wanting to be in my Zoom calls. So
I love it. Yeah, Bunny and Otter are always wanting me to be out of my Zoom calls. All done. Bye, stranger. Bye. No. Bye. Poop. Otter picked that up like almost immediately from Bunny. It was very, very funny. He's like,
insert random poop here.
Well, he doesn't have a poop button yet, because I am afraid of what his adolescent brain is going to do with that word. But Bunny would, should do all done, or bye. And he has both all done and bye on his board. Wait, does he have bye? Yes, he does. So he'll use all done periodically, but I just took him out for some wild city socialization and blew his little mind. So hopefully he's going to sleep through this. And Bunny was left here with my friend, which is abnormal for her. So that was probably wildly exhausting for her as well. So barring dogs or people walking on the beach, we should have a fairly interruption-free chit chat.
Sounds great. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. So I don't know why don't we have you introduce yourself first? And then I've got some questions for you. We are talking today because you are a master of interspecies relationships and coaching people on how to have happily coexisting multiple species in their home. But why don't you just give people a slightly better introduction than I just did?
Hello, everyone. I'm Naomi Rotenberg. As you can see from the back here pictures, I work with households that have both cats and dogs and are wanting help with either integrating new species into their house, just new animals, or they're already having like some kind of existing issues. People call me because there isn't that much dedicated information about cats and dogs together and the similarities and the differences between them that might inform how their interactions could go, either positively or negatively. Okay, positively and negatively are loaded words. So I'm going to say whether they are healthy interactions or full of conflict. And it has been really, really exciting for me to kind of like specialize in this because I get to meet a lot of really great pet parents who have dedicated themselves to like, they've trained their dogs a lot. They are like looking for the next answer because like just training the dog isn't really getting them where they want to go. And I really like being able to give them some more insight and helping them like through a process that is specific to what they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's super specific. And there are so many households that have cats and dogs. Maybe you got them at the same time, maybe got one first and got the other, and then sort of just think it'll work out, right? Like it's going to be fine. They just sort it out. And a lot of times that isn't the case. And that's obviously when people would want to come to you. I am curious about sort of your origin story. Like, how did this come to be your specific passion?
My superhero origin story.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting. So I got Rio, the cat, first, like straight out of college. I was like, yay, I can have my own animals. I didn't grow up with pets. My dad was allergic and my parents both worked more than full time. And so I was like the kid who was like, I need a dog. And they were like, hell no. So I, being the super nerd that I was/am, went to the library back when people went to physical libraries, and I would get out all the books about dog breeds and all of that stuff. And I was like, yes, this is really, really interesting to me, but I could not actually do anything about it. Now, fast forward to like in college, there was outside of my apartment, there was a indoor outdoor cat that belonged to like the apartment building next door. And he slash she, I have no idea like what their sex was. I would just like hang out with them outside because animals are awesome and cats are great. And like this was my first like real opportunity to like visualize a cat doing normal cat things, because outdoor cats do a lot of normal cat behavior. And then they decided that I was pretty cool and they would just walk into my house with me whenever I would come home.
My house
and,
now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my roommate, who is still one of my best friends, even though she doesn't really like pets, was mildly okay with this new addition. But anyway, so I was teaching myself all about dogs from like an educational standpoint, and I was really excited to have like this year-long kind of like internship with this this cat. And then I actually like went into developmental psychology. So I was working with kids and working on like, you know, just verbal children, working on like social cognitive development stuff. And that was really interesting. But I was like, I can't do basic research. It's just not for me. So I was at a crossroads and I took up a job at a doggy daycare while I still had my lease and needed to, you know, pay the bills. So that was a crash course in dog behavior, like all at once.
Oh yeah.
12-hour shifts of like 60 to 70 dogs at a time.
Like
and
really
that was
threw
like
yourself into the fire.
really did, because remember, like to that point, like I had not actually done anything hands-on with dogs, which is like kind of nuts to me looking back, because I did it kind of backwards from like a lot of dog trainers that, you know, who like grew up with dogs and they just kind of like fell into it. I was like really kind of thinking about it like academically, and I did a master's in animal behavior, and that at the time I had Rio, and then the year after that I got Ori, who's this little white fluff who's now taking a nap next to me, and so I immediately what?
Also a cat?
No, he's a dog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's.
I didn't know if you were referring to a second cat you'd gotten or the okay.
No, gotcha. I have one cat and one dog from the beginning, and they're old men now. So, you know, I got them almost about 10 years ago, and I'm basically when I've been doing this since. So I went into the multi-species household very quickly, but I actually did it knowing that I wanted both in my house. And so when I adopted Rio, I said, I know I'm going to be getting a dog. I want to make sure that this cat has been quote unquote dog tested, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But at the time, that's what I knew would be like the best indicator that he would be good with dogs. Luckily, they were right. And it's also lucky that Ori, the dog, actually doesn't like dogs very much, but he loves cats. Aww. So he's like kind of a cat himself. So it did end up working out pretty well, but I was living in New York in a 1-bedroom apartment, and like I was learning all of this stuff, doing a apprenticeship with a dog trainer, and it was a small company, and I was the only trainer on staff who had any experience with cats. And so any call that came in that was like even remotely cat related, like if there was a cat in the home, even if it wasn't like the main problem that the people were trying to solve, they were like, Naomi, you can do it. Yeah. And so like, even when I was a baby trainer, I got to do this like multi-species work. And it was those were my favorite ones. When we live in New York City, there's a lot of dog like leash reactivity and all of that stuff. And I love doing all of those, like, you know, quote unquote, normal dog trainer requests. Right. But like, this was something that was specific, and I was just really interested in it because it encompassed everything that I loved. And the last thing was that when I was doing my master's at Hunter, there was a big push to really understand like all of these learning theory concepts like apply to all species, and you just need to know the basic tenets, but then specifically like the information about the species that you're working with and how to adjust based on that. And so like that was always in the back of my mind. You can't treat cats like you can dogs, but you kind of can if you know about cats, right? So it's like so having that kind of like drilled into my head really kind of helped me with those types of cases. And so I moved to Philadelphia, did the like, I struck out on my own. I took every case that could come past my desk. And then after a while I said, you know what, I'm just going to go back to what I really enjoyed the most. And a couple of years later, here I am. Now I'm focused exclusively on dog cat stuff.
That's awesome. And it's a niche that I just don't see like filled much. Like, I think you're the only behavior consultant that I know of, or that I've even like seen online that's working specifically with cats and dogs.
It may or may not be a good business decision.
Oh, but it's important.
It is.
You're doing a really wonderful thing for a lot of households that get in kind of over their heads in potentially like very dangerous and scary situations, because a lot of times there's like a huge size and power difference in that dynamic. And this, I guess this is something I've been curious about too. It's like, is there some overlap in cat and dog body language? I mean, I feel like both of them have some pretty obvious signals that most people know. Like most people know a hiss is back off. Most people know a growl is back off. But, you know, in terms of some of this more subtle canine communications, like a lip lick or a whale eye, are there certain signs that cats give that are quite a bit more subtle that sort of parallel the subtle dog canine signals, just to get more specific, dog canid canine signals. And then like, how are some of those signals different? I feel like that's got to be sort of like a good starting point for people to understand how their animals are feeling.
Definitely. And one of my like pipe dream projects is to like come up with like a cat dog dictionary.
Yeah, that would be so cool and useful.
So I'm going to just go back to what you said before, where it's like, it's really obvious that hiss means go away and growl means go away. It's not always true. No. So it's not always. So, I mean, a hiss is fairly universal, like a defensive type communication. But a growl, like play growls happen all the time.
Oh, that's for sure.
And so a misconception that happens from the dog's perspective a lot is like any kind of vocalization from the cat, or even like a casual pawing act can be misinterpreted as a play solicitation, or at least like part of a play behavioral repertoire. And so a dog who's already like, there's a cat, but there you go. A dog who's already like, I want to play or I want to investigate this cat, and then they're getting these kinds of like borderline signals that is not clearly like back off, right?
Yeah.
And so then you get the swipe with no, he's literally like pushing my lamp onto the space bar of my computer.
He's like, this is gonna be fun, watch me.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, what we were talking about, play solicitations that are like borderline. The dog would not necessarily see that, and so the cat's then like next defensive aggression option is swipe with claws. That's usually read very easily by the dog, but that's like kind of that's like the end of the line. There's also an issue where cats will roll on their backs. Sometimes it's like a, hey, let's hang out. A lot of times it's, I need all of my weapons available, mouth and all four paws. And so a dog, again, might be like, oh, this is some kind of like self-handicapping. Dude, you're killing me, Smalls. Turning that off. This is some kind of self-handicapping thing. And the cat's like,
yeah,
I don't have the opportunity to run away. I'm just going to do a freeze and like, wait for the attack. And then they slash. And the dog says, what the hell?
I'm gonna get my weapons ready.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Like that was not what I intended, because everyone uses fight, flight, freeze, right? All species. And so a cat might be fleeing. A dog might say, wee, fun chase. If the cat is unable to flee, then they might stop, drop, and roll and wait to slash because they have no other option. Other cats, if they get into that situation a lot, will actually learn to proactively go after the dog. It's unusual, but if they have found that they don't really have other options,
attack first, ask questions later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the original question was, are there things that are the same? And yes, there are, but they look slightly different a lot of times. So cats' tails, for example, they're a cat tail that is up and like a question mark tail, usually like gently swaying or even like a little stiff, like is usually pro-social. Hi, I'm curious about you. You usually see like fairly relaxed, loose body language as they're approaching, like soft eyes, usually like ears semi-forward. And for a lot of dogs, that is potentially an aggression signal. High tail, like very like kind of weird flaggy thing. But some dogs do wave their tails kind of high when they're pleased as well. So they can learn that is what the cat means in that situation. Cats wagging their tail is usually not such a great is usually pretty agitated if they're flicky. So the good thing about that is that it's not the same kind of like relaxed wag that a dog does when they're happy. The cat flick does kind of look a little bit like the dog kind of like appeasement wag, where it's a little bit lower and the like end of the tail is really going, but the base isn't. So those kind of look similar because the cat tail tends to be a little bit tucked when they're doing that. Crouching smaller tends to translate. But the getting stiff translates too. Whale eye isn't as much of a thing because for cats, and dogs get freaked out with cat eyes a lot because cats are starey. Cats are, like even if they're relaxed and happy, cats are much more starey than dogs are, and eye contact is a big trigger for a lot of dogs, and so that's a big miscommunication that has to be taught often. So like I have a client right now who, as soon as the cat like looks at the dog for more than a second or two, the dog stiffens, and like we have to basically actively be teaching her like that is a signal to move away. You don't have to move forward. And that's the way we teach like the translation, right, is to like basically have a cue transfer where
trigger to a cue
trigger to cue, because that's the only way they'll learn the alternate meaning of what that behavior looks like in the other animal. Did I hit everything that you were thinking? Is there other body language that comes to mind that could either be similar or completely different?
What is there a cat equivalent of like a play bow? Like what is solicitous body language in a cat?
Great question. So it depends on the cat's behavioral repertoire in general, their age, their just general playfulness. Like a lot of cats will like gently bop,
Oh,
right? Which like,
yeah.
hello, boom.
Yeah,
That can be misinterpreted like fairly
totally.
easily. Others
I left
will,
my claws out.
yeah, there's no clause, it's just, boop.
Yeah.
But if previously there had been a boop with potential claws, like that's confusing for a dog because like,
Totally.
are there claws? I don't know, because the unsheathing happens very quickly. Yes, so like sometimes you see this in kittens a lot, where they will like kind of pounce their whole bodies like side to side.
Mhm.
They will like rear back on their paw, on their back legs, and kind of paw a little bit. It's so cute.
I can like see the meme in my head. It's so cute.
They will flop over on their backs.
Mhm.
So all of these things are ambiguous,
Yeah.
which can be difficult.
Yeah,
And so often context is really important.
for sure.
This, and that can be confusing I mean, dogs are not as like completely cut and dry either, but I think
Right.
cats are more difficult to figure out.
They're more difficult to figure out their body language.
Yeah, because a lot of things that look similar mean different things in different contexts. And people aren't as bad as people are reading dog body language. I think they're worse reading cat body language.
Yeah. I think maybe there's like less of an impetus to really study it because they're sort of viewed as these like super independent creatures who can kind of fend for themselves. They can get up high. Like, I don't know of anyone who has a reactive cat where they really need to be mindful. I'm sure they probably exist, but I think people spend a lot more time studying dog body language because we take them outside with us because they have dog interactions in the outside world that we really have to manage carefully. So it doesn't seem like as important a thing to focus on, but it's really, really cool to hear how many differences and similarities there are. And it makes a lot of sense why there would be so much conflict between dogs and cats speaking like these totally different physical nonverbal languages, that and the size difference and the like stabby bits difference. Yeah, that's a factor as well.
The stabby bits do play a role. The thing that's really interesting in how I kind of, after doing this for a while, have kind of like defined coexistence. The dogs and cats that like seem to be okay, right? They're okay, not because there's an absence of conflict, but because they've either learned each other's body language enough to be able to like self handle to be able to like communicate with each other and diffuse any conflict tension.
Yeah.
So the humans might not notice the more subtle stuff, because the big stuff isn't happening because they figured each other out enough. But they might not be friends. They might still be having conflict, but at least they're coexisting like roommates who have just kind of like figured out like each other's schedules, and they're like, you're okay, but we're not besties, right?
Yeah. So they just sort of like stay in different rooms, move sort of in opposite directions throughout the day, kind of avoid each other.
Yeah. And when they do interact, they have figured out ways to do it in so that like overt aggression doesn't need to happen in order to like get where they want to go, or like get access to the resources that they were looking for, or stuff like that. Where the big conflicts tend to happen is where like not coexisting is like very obvious when you get these like what I call big behaviors, right? Like the things you cannot miss as a human, right? The hissing, the growling, the swiping, the like chasing, the picking the cat up, all of those things.
My God.
Trapping other animals, all of that stuff. If we helped the cat and dog learn those earlier signals, like stress signals, and translate those for them, then they'll be much more likely to be able to self-regulate, so they don't have to get to those big conflicts. So that's like the first level of coexistence that I tend to look for, is like it doesn't mean that they love each other. It just means that they've like figured each other out enough to not be like actively stressing each other out and having big up blowout like bar fights all the time, all the time. So that's the first level. And most I'm just whatever, some proportion, why people just say like, just let them work it out.
Bunny. Oh, she sees a bird. Bird go belly.
Go belly. Yeah.
Go belly. She looks at me like, what? Friends, come here. It's just a bird. Come here, sweetie. Come here. Come here. Yeah, hi.
Hey, Buns.
Hi, you want to hop up? Yeah, say hello to everyone.
Hi, Buns.
Oh, you can see she's so upset. She's like, there's a bird. It's okay,
no.
girl.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
It's just a bird. It's just a bird. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yawning.
Good girl. Good girl. Yeah, you're okay. You can go back to settle now. Otter. Come here. You want to say hi too? Come here. Come here. You're like, no, I do what I want. That's his little tail palm. Go, there he is. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. He's gonna go check out the cat right now. We are just now, he was super chill with our cat, Ringo, when he first came home, chill, curious. He was raised with a cat. And since he has really turned the gear into adolescence, he's like, I will chase. I am a chaser. I will chase. So we're now, I just got a flirt pole. So I'm going to work on some impulse control with that. But what are some of the things, like, what do you think is the number one reason for conflict that you see? Is it like a prey drive sort of thing? Or like, what are some of the most common issues that you see happening in households between dogs and cats?
Yeah, so they kind of break into a few different categories. One is where the dog is moving towards the cat, but not because they're scared of the cat. It's either like a prey drive thing or a play thing. And sometimes, I mean, then those are two sides of the same coin.
Right.
Play is prey and vice versa. So we don't have any kind of like fear of the cat. So if the cat is a runner, then that doesn't tend to go very well. The animals who, the combinations where like the dog is playful and the cat is willing to stand their ground and be less prey-esque, they tend to be able to work things out on their own quicker. Or if we are working on it, it tends to go quicker than if you have like both sides of the equation, like really kind of contributing to the issue. The second one looks very similar, but it's when the dog is moving towards the cat because they're scared. That's like your typical like dog reactivity stuff outside, where it's like, I'm gonna be big and mean in order to get you to go away. So a lot of those behaviors look similar, but the way we treat it is very different. Instead of like just working on being able to be calm around the cat and like interact appropriately, the goal is really like, just like, you can keep your distance from the cat. Like you don't even need to worry about them. And that tends to work best if there is a cat who also kind of wants their own space or who is neutral. Like that tends to resolve relatively quickly because we're just focusing on the dog having better feelings around the cat and knowing what the appropriate coping mechanisms are. Move away. That tends to be really helpful. But where it gets tricky is the mismatch where you have a cat who's forward moving and a dog who's like, what the F? And so, the cat is not acting neutral. Like we're talking any kind of like dog reactivity work that you see outside, like a lot of ways to make that easier for your reactive dog is to make the to make it clear that like you will not be interacting with that scary thing, right? Like it's going to remain over there, so like you have a little bit of more control. But like when there's a cat who is not going to stay over there, they're gonna they are coming towards you. That tends to be another kind of like double-sided issue where we have to work extensively with the cat as well, to be less spatially intrusive to the dog. And so like, yeah, they look a lot very similar, but it's the combinations, like what I call the interactive tendencies, that are like the most important when you're kind of like breaking those up. But those are the general buckets that they fall into.
So you're really teaching people how to train dogs and cats.
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually the types of wonderful clients that come to me have put in so much work with their dogs. Like the dogs are usually like light years in front of the cats in terms of training. They've like read all the books. They've even taken classes or worked with other trainers and all that stuff. And so they have like really good foundations, but it's not working because it isn't enough to just train the dog to leave the cat alone. Like there's something about their scenario that is requires the work to go past that kind of like, everyone just says, oh, just train the dog to leave the cat alone. That works.
But what if the cat doesn't leave the dog alone?
What if the cat doesn't leave the dog alone?
Yeah.
And what if the dog, leaving the cat alone is not the motivation that you want? You need to teach them to like engage appropriately. Also, you can't just like say, okay, downstay.
You're never going to see this. Never interact again. I mean, I live with this animal. Like, how am I not going to interact? So what would you say some of the foundations for training your cat in these situations would be? What do those foundations look like?
So in my programs, I actually have the people working on the same exact foundation behaviors for the cats and the dogs, and then we just kind of mix and match depending on the types of interactions that we want to try to like simulate and then reinforce appropriately. So we work on reinforcement strategies a lot with the cats at first, because many people have trouble finding like food treats that a cat will take reliably in a training scenario. So like, even if they're like light years ahead with the dog, like sometimes we're stuck at click treat for the cat for a little while. And that's a skill, teaching animal how to eat within a training scenario. So we always start with that. And we teach like name recognition and like a whiplash turn. So it's like a conditioned interrupter of like, stop what you're doing, and the next thing I'm going to cue you to do applies to you. So the name is really important because you're working with multiple animals. So they have to know whatever cue is coming out of your mouth is you're asking them and not the other one. So the name game comes in where like eventually we like say one animal's name and they get reinforced, and then the other animal's name, they get reinforced. That's kind of like level 2. But we work on the settle, the offered settle, for actively being able to relax around triggers and distractions. But we also work on place as an interrupter. So that's go to your bed and stay there until I say so. That's like a safety thing.
Yeah.
Contrasted with, and like the place is always out in case shit hits the fan and like you have to tell them to go. So that might be a cat tree for the cat, might be a dog bed for the dog, versus like an offered settle where like the mat comes out, and like during a setup where like the cat and a dog will be around, like your mat is available in case you want to settle. Like that's a very different skill that we actually do both. We also do hand targeting. That's a big one. So those are the main foundation skills that every animal needs to know. I think every animal should know all of those.
I need those skills today. I need
Yeah,
some
go
really
over
real
there.
relaxation. Go to place, Lex. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go over there, hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the main ones. And then, yeah, we mix and match them. So like if we need the cat to go somewhere, we can have their settle mat somewhere. And then the dog is and they're working on some enrichment thing. And then the dog is working on moving around the space from station to station, so that the cat is able to watch the dog moving, but the dog isn't fixated on the cat, right? So like there's, you can also have the cat doing hand targets back and forth. So they're moving around and the dog is also moving, or the dog is settling, or what, right? There's a lot of combinations that you can do with just those 3.5 behaviors.
Seems like it has the potential to be really, really tricky to manage that. If you're like, maybe a baby gate and then a dog and then a cat, but it seems like ideal scenario would be a cat on a leash and a dog on a leash and 2 people working that. Like it seems really complicated to manage 2 sort of independent creatures trying to learn the same things that might have some conflict. How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a very specific order that I do these things in. So, and actually the way that I've designed the setups themselves is like 1 person can do them. 2 people is always easier, but 1 person can do them. So I'll get to that in a second. But
Okay.
All of the foundation skills that I was just talking about, like you are teaching those to each animal individually. Like the other one is off somewhere else, not in view. So you need to get those foundation skills up to snuff, enough to be able to be proofed, so that when the other animal is visible, you can have a not chance in hell of of getting a response. So, but that takes a little while, right? Especially if you're working with multiple animals. So, I don't want to stall my clients out at the beginning. Like I want them to be making progress. So while they're teaching things to the animals individually, they're also working with what I call casual setups. So it's like, everyone is doing an enrichment activity, usually a food-based enrichment activity, with their meals. So we're not adding any like extra time to the people's day, because that's a big one. It's like we've got a lot kind of to cover, and I want to make sure that everyone isn't overwhelmed by what they have to do. So like during one or both meals of the day, if you want to be, have extra credit, each each animal is either working on a stationary enrichment activity. So usually that's like a snuffle mat or a licky mat, or a controlled movement enrichment activity. So that's basically like 3 or more stationary activities that they're just moving around to, stations, basically. So you've divided whatever their meal is up into the number of stations that you've put out.
And you're guiding them from one to the other, or they're just making their way from one to the other?
So depending on your animal and whether you are able to, you can guide them, but most of the time they can do it themselves, right? So like you've checked before you've done this that like they know how to eat from a licky mat, or like they know how to eat from a snuffle mat. So you're very like hands off here, and that helps to allow you to be able to interfere if you need to. And you can also kind of see what your animal's behaviors look like without you micromanaging them.
Yeah.
And what's important there is that, like, depending on where you start in the journey, right? Like if there's a safety concern versus like people who are like later on, they're able to spend some time together, but like things kind of just go awry occasionally, right? Like if there's a safety concern, there's at least 1, if not 2, very clear barriers between those animals. So if one of them says, you know what, I'm done with my meal, and you aren't able to redirect them in a certain way, like they're not going to be able to get to each other. Mm-hmm. So that's important, right? Like, safety first always. So if there's a safety concern, you're doing these setups through screen doors, through gates. The dog is maybe on a leash, you're holding the leash, but you're not like holding it tight. So they can make the appropriate behavioral decisions, but you're holding onto it like a safety, like a seatbelt kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so again, you can go through all of the different combinations, iterations of those setups casually for a long time. And that's really like a big jump for a lot of animals because the wonderful thing about it is that the food-based enrichment is giving each other positive associations with each other just by like classical conditioning. They're just like, I can see the other animal, they're at a distance that I can handle, and I'm getting my food, and it's fun because it's in enrichment. And they are learning.
Hey, Buns. Hey, come here. Come here. Come here, sweetie. Hi. What are you doing? Come here. Just barking and nothing today, huh? What do you see? Come here, squirrel. I name my dog after one animal, call her pony, squirrel, badger. Come here. Oh, she looked when I said badger. Is that the one I've been using a lot lately? Come here. Come here. Come here. Hi. Hi, sweetheart. Yeah, we're okay. We're okay, badger. Sorry for that interruption.
That's okay. So you're getting the classical conditioning going on, and you're also getting sneaky operant conditioning because they're learning to be relatively calm and stationary and not staring at the other animals. So they're working on like fairly good looking and then disengaging. And whatever movement they are doing around the room is fairly controlled. So what I was talking about before, where like the cats need to learn to like not book it across the floor and act like prey, like, so they're getting a chance to practice moving calmly and slowly around the room on the floor when the dog is in sight. So you're getting that operant aspect of it too, so that when you finally have those skills on board, then you can actively cue those things. Then you switch into what I call single enrichment setups, which again, one person can do because one animal is doing their enrichment thing just like we were doing when it's in situation, and the person is working actively with one of the animals on an operant based activity that is similar to the enrichment. So for example, we do an offered, instead of the stationary enrichment, you do an offered settle, and you're actively reinforcing disengagement, right? Instead of the controlled movement, we start with super bowls. So they literally have stations, but they're moving, and you're actively reinforcing them for disengaging from the animal. So they're allowed to look at the other animal, and then when they look up at you, good job, click, and you move to the next station. The extra exciting version of the controlled movement aspect is ping pong. So you're just literally like, they're starting to now run across the room. And that's very exciting.
That's too exciting for me. That's too exciting for me.
Right. But that's level 2, right? You don't do that until you've done the Super Bowls aspect, that the other animal has shown that it's not a big deal that the other animal is moving around. Yeah. Right. So I keep saying other animal, and that could be a little bit confusing. Okay. But which animal are you talking about? You crazy, whatever. Which animal are you talking about? Yeah, so it all builds on each other, but you're kind of reiterating the similar steps. So there's routine, there's consistency. You're trying to simulate certain triggers that often happen, but in a way that is controlled. And then once you're at that point, then you're really like just saying, okay, where are the, what I call sticky spots, like still happening? Like now that they're spending some more time together, most of the time it's probably okay. What's going on? Like, where does the conflict kind of like pop out? And then you can create setups based on that. So one of the ones that I just did with one of my clients is that when the cat jumps up to, it doesn't happen when the cat jumps up to their cat tree, but when they jump to the back of the recliner, the dog goes nutty because the recliner is one of those like,
Oh yeah.
whatever they're called, the rocking recliners.
Yeah. So the cat triggers the rock. So the cat's going back.
The cat is going like back and forth.
Oh,
Yeah.
danger.
And so we worked specifically on that, where the dog there's always single enrichment going on because we want one person to be able to do it, right? So the dog had different stations around the room, and my client was asking the cat to target up to the back of the chair and then off and then up and off. So like using those foundation skills plus the enrichment happening. And basically the dog is like eating, watching the cat jump up, eating, moving around. And so like that is a very targeted setup. I wouldn't from the beginning say, let's have the cat, jump up onto the recliner.
Right.
But that's kind of like based on observations that we are doing throughout the process. Say like, okay, where do we need to like focus? So that's the general progression of everything. And yeah, one person can do it.
That's really, really cool. Yeah, that's really, really cool. I want to talk for a second about what a cat's needs are, because I think I mentioned this earlier. A lot of people think of cats as like these independent little creatures that you just sort of share your house with, but they're not. They're like social animals. They need enrichment and they need they need attention and affection from you. So how do you think the needs of a cat differ and or are the same to the needs of a dog?
They are the same in that they need, like you said, social interaction with us. And they often get shafted in that when we have to do like complete separation. Like it tends to be easier to put the cat away and the dog gets more attention. So on the social side of it, I always recommend that you kind of like schedule quality time with your cat. And whether that's snuggling or just like sleeping together or playing actively or training or whatever. So that's number one, same social wise. Some dogs also require the, con-specific social engagement, like they like playing with other dogs. And there are some cats that also like playing with other cats, but you can't really have kitty play dates in the same way that you can have doggy play dates. So that's not usually an option, but some cats would do really well with having another cat to play with. Doesn't mean you need to go out and get your cat another cat. I'm just saying for the needs of cats. Obviously, food and water are quite important, but the way you provide those can be helpful. So cats often like running water, so fountains and or drippy sinks. People are always like,
Totally.
They just like leave their sink like dripping occasionally. Anyway, that's a huge waste of water, but some people do it. And or having multiple water sources around the house, so they don't have to be in a specific spot while they're drinking, because that's a little bit vulnerable for them. So having elevated water sources is good. And cats are both prey and predator at the same time. And so like you'll see them often like crouching over their water because they're like, I'm vulnerable here. So making sure that they don't have to watch their back when they're drinking. Also making sure that their water bowls are wide enough to accommodate their whiskers.
I have just learned about this. This is so interesting. Please explain for anyone who doesn't know this fact.
So cat whiskers are extremely sensitive. They use them to basically navigate spatial stuff. They, if their whiskers touch the sides of whatever they're trying to get through, they know they can't get through it, for example, right? So if their whiskers are touching the sides of their food bowl or their water dish, that's very uncomfortable for them, and they can get what's called whisker fatigue.
It makes me so sad thinking about all the tiny bowls of water that I've given my cats in the past. It's like,
Some of them really don't mind it. But sometimes you might say, oh, my cat's not drinking enough. Or like I had someone recently ask me, you know, like, okay, well, my cat and my dog are sharing a water bowl. Is that bad? And I was like, well, if there's no conflict around it, it's not bad. But is your cat's water bowl really small? And they're like, yeah, it is. I said, well, maybe just try giving her the same size as the dog and see if she wants to share then. And so
Stop sharing.
yeah.
Like, I want my own bowl. I just want,
yeah, I want my own. I mean,
bowl.
Right. It wasn't that there was big conflict around that, but it's always better to have like more resources around if possible, especially for cats. They like to have spots in their house that they can relax. There's spots in their house where they can play. And territory is very important for cats. And so making sure that they have places that they can climb up to. Not all cats are climbers. There are floor cats, but they're in general, especially if there's a dog around, it's nice to have a lot of options for them to be safe up and out of the way of the dog. And they need to hunt, whether it's virtually or not. So like,
I'm imagining a cat in one of those little VR boxes.
well, you know, they make iPad apps for cats, right?
They do, where you can like swat flies and stuff, huh?
Yeah,
Oh,
I have not tested whether that's a smart idea, like a la the
laser
pointer.
Yeah.
But they make them.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more like bird feeders. Right, where the cat can't necessarily get to the prey, but they're at least seeing it. Although for some cats that can be very frustrating. So you have to know your cat. You have to watch them.
Yeah.
But almost all cats will enjoy some like prey, like hunting based play activity, wand toys, even like fetch with crinkle balls, like all of that kind of stereotypical cat play stuff. Like it's better to play multiple times a day for short periods than like really like try to get them to play for like forever. But yeah, it in that way it's very similar to dogs, right? They need to get their energy up, they need to get their energy out, but then they need to be able to relax. And the last
enrichment.
And they need enrichment, and it needs to be, not just like, it has to be thought out a little bit. And the last thing that I was going to say,
beatbox.
Needs what?
I said you're gonna beatbox.
I'm gonna beatbox. I was in an acapella group in college. Yeah, I'm super cool. Let's it'll come to me.
Okay.
But yeah, needs enrichment. Did I answer your question? I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted for you to help people understand that cats need a lot more than I think a lot of people think they do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And I've been guilty myself. Like I said, small water bowls, didn't know. Whisker fatigue is such a cute, sad thing that now I'm like, okay, never again. Big bowls for cats, enrichment for cats. I've got a ton of licky mats. I've experimented with like some frozen, like a little bit of goat's kefir or kefir, whatever, goat's milk kefir, and some like wet food, freeze it, see how my cat likes that.
You might find that the freezing does not work very well.
I have found that.
They prefer their food to be prey temperature.
Yeah.
So freezing is kind of like, this doesn't feel right. So you might actually heat up their food a little bit. Ooh. So like it's higher than room temperature. It's not scalding. Don't scald your cat. But warming it. Everyone should hear this. Do not burn your cat's tongue. They will never forgive you. But right, like body temperature, 98.6, right? That's higher than room temperature. So if you have a picky cat, you can try to heat it up. Oh yeah, and the last thing I was going to say was smell. So we don't think about smell with cats as much as we do with dogs. But cats are very scent oriented. So making sure that they have the opportunity to scratch at a lot of stuff to get their scent in their territories, but also to, like, if your cat's an indoor cat, like bring some nature inside and let them sniff around at it. Or if they have a catio, to make sure that there's like, screens and they can smell the outside. It's not just like glassed in.
Yeah. Johnny recently built one of those for Ringo, so you can like go outside and just sort of like observe people walking and birds and squirrels. And we haven't done this here yet, but at our old house, he built cat forms all over. So like steps and stacks like on walls so that our cats could sort of travel. Like there was even like a little what are those called with the bridges, the slats?
Oh yeah.
Like not a drawbridge, but a suspension bridge, little suspension bridge.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're gonna do that here too. And he built them a little like mechanized drippy fountain with like rocks we've collected. It's lovely.
Wow. Cat heaven.
Yeah. I think I mean, this has been a super valuable conversation for me personally. It really inspires me to start training my cats a little bit more. I spend so much time trying to train my dogs to the best I can, right? And work through their issues. And we definitely have a case of Otter wanting to chase and play with Ringo a whole lot right now that I will need to address. So yeah, this has inspired me to start training cats, or my cat at least. For sure.
Is there a situation where Otter tends to be more chasey?
When Ringo runs.
Okay.
And Ringo runs because he thinks he's going to be chased.
Right.
But I don't know if you saw my Instagram story the other day that Bunny at night now, Ringo will like go into my office and he'll like sleep on the chair, and Bunny will just go into, it's like a nice and quiet there. And she'll just be on the other side of the room. They're just chilling peacefully in the same room together. And unless he's in movement, she's cool with him. Like she doesn't want to eat. She's mostly curious and a little bit playful. And then as soon as he runs, that just like sort of lizard brain, right? The primal like prey drive kicks in, and she's like, I'm going. I don't know why. And with Otter, I think there's just so much arousal in his little teenage brain right now that it's a lot for him to contain. But yeah, none of it seems fear-based at all. It just seems curious, playful, and then like genetic.
Yeah. So, I mean, this management is always going to be the first thing. So if you're not able to supervise them, then preventing Otter from getting close, because then we have that cycle of like, Ringo's cueing Otter and Otter's cueing Ringo, do these behaviors that we don't really want them to do. But that's also what's really great about, like, there's a big split, or you're lumping a lot, not you. One is lumping a lot between a stationary cat and a running cat. And so trying to split that up into a cat that is moving, but like elevated, that might be easier for him being Otter to see and make appropriate choices than cat that is going from, lump
like
to
running right in
prey.
front of my nose. Yeah,
exactly. And then you would split to moving casually around the room on the floor, stuff like that. So it would make it a lot easier to be proactive in that way, and that would also help Ringo be more confident. Every time you practice like Otter being around Ringo and not chasing, the more confident Ringo will be, and then he will act less like prey, and then we're going to have a much better feedback loop
for sure
than what you're having now.
For sure. I am excited to put some of these tips into action and get started today. Probably as soon as we're done here, because they're all sleepy and relaxed, and I hear Ringo upstairs being like, Mom, come do a thing with me. So maybe it's a good time for me to do that. One last question, or a couple more questions. Do you ever work with other species, like dogs and guinea pigs, for example, or dogs and turtles, or any other animals?
I haven't, because I've never gotten called for that. But also, I don't know enough about those other species to feel like I can work on that with that species particularly. So I would usually recommend, like, if I was called, that I would at least consult with someone who has much more experience with that species to see if there is something that I can do, not just with, we're going to say dog and, right? I know what to do with the dog and that's going to help. But with the other species, I would at least try to get some background information about the species specific behaviors and their needs and all that stuff. But I'm the first to say I'm not an expert in any species besides for cats, dogs. And the one thing I will say is that I do work with dogs and humans, human babies. Yeah. So I do dog and kid stuff too. That's taken a little bit of a backseat to the dog and cat stuff because there's a lot of awesome people who also do dog and kid stuff. But humans are species too. And, dogs and kids are just as unpredictable as cats in many ways, even more so. So that is another species that I do consults for. Yeah.
Awesome. And where can people find you? And where can people find you? Where can they go if they want to learn more?
So there's a couple of places where I am relatively active. Number one is Instagram. So at Praiseworthy Pets. And I encourage you also. Okay, great. Yay. Praiseworthy Pets. I'm going to say it one more time. And my podcast is called It's Training Cats and Dogs, which I think is hilarious. I do love a good pun. And that is specific to cat dog stuff. It's really, people are really liking it. I love doing it. So I encourage you to listen to that. And you can also do some coaching with me. I have a membership that is attached to my private coaching programs. So you would do the private coaching program with me. As I kind of like laid out the different steps that we would do it. We talked about that a little bit. And then while you're doing that private coaching with me, there's also the Cat and Dog Coexistence Club that you're a member of. So it's hanging out with other people who are going through very similar things. We have live sessions, we have communal coaching. And so it's a really great little community that really helps to augment the like private one-on-one work that you're doing with me with your specific animals. So that's the main way to work with me directly if you are ready to do that.
Amazing. So many fantastic resources. I forgot that you had a podcast. I need to go back and listen to all of those episodes that I've missed. I'm always looking for new fun behavior podcasts. And especially now that Otter's decided that Ringo is his favorite chasing companion, better get right to that. But it has been so amazing to chat with you, and thank you so much for taking the time. And I learned so much, and I'm looking forward. Cut that part out. I got this far, and now so looking forward to chatting with you again. Hopefully, in the next few weeks, we can do a live and answer any further questions that anyone has, and just keep the dialogue going. So this is really important stuff.
It has been so wonderful. I love every time I talk to you. I just love it so much. And thank you for offering me this platform. And I hope that everyone gets coexistence between their cats and dogs and has a good day, week, life, year, whatever.
Yeah, that's a good note. Have a good life, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay.
Oh, I was so professional until then. No.